Salutations, respected viewers. This is George from Ireland, and in this video I'm going to talk about some of the accomplishments of the League of Nations. People often speak about the League of Nations as though it had a dismal record, but that's not entirely true. Yes, there was failures, obviously spectacularly, at the outbreak of the Second World War. But let's examine some of its achievements prior to that. The 1920s was not an entirely sorrowful decade, the Roaring Twenties. Likewise, the 30s wasn't a completely terrible time, in spite of the Great Depression. So, minor successes. In 1923, there was a dispute over the city of Memel. Anyway, it was decided that Lithuania would be allowed to keep this city, though the port was made into an international zone, which was superintended by the League of Nations. There was the Turkish War of National Salvation in 1922, when they pushed the Greek army out of Asia Minor. That's the mainland part of Turkey. Turkey and Greece turned themselves into ethnically coherent states, and that was by pushing out the ethnic minority in either country. A lot of ethnic minority people, either Greeks in Turkey or Turks in Greece, had been killed during the war. Civilians, not talking about soldiers killed in combat. The League of Nations had to help refugees be resettled in each other country. Coming on to 1925, there was the War of the Stray Dog between Greece and Bulgaria. This border dispute was because the feelings were running high. Bulgaria had once had an Aegean port, which had regained access to the sea, or had the Black Sea port, but the Aegean. So a Greek soldier's dog ran into Bulgaria. The Greek soldier chased after it. Then he was shot dead by Bulgarian border guards. So the Greek army opened fire on the Bulgarians. War petered out after a few days, but by that time, over 50 men had been killed. The League of Nations organised a ceasefire. Greece was found to be in the wrong and paid £45,000 in compensation. That wasn't such a measly sum back then as it is now. So 50 people killed. Of course, that's lamentable, but that's a fraction of what had been killed. It had become to a full-scale war. And likewise, okay, the League of Nations couldn't prevent the Greco-Turkish War, partly because the League of Nations, the victorious allies, had granted some of Asia Minor to Greece, but they did help to organise a ceasefire, and they did help to move refugees and ensure they had the basics of life when they got to their new homes. Now I'll also examine some of the failures of the League of Nations in the early days. So 1919, Poland and Czechoslovakia squabbled over Teschen. Teschen is a coal-rich town. Remember, that was a crucial commodity for industry, domestic heating and so forth. A conference of ambassadors was held to strive to arrive at a compromise. The Poles seized the town. Poland's army and population 3 times greater than that of Czechoslovakia. So the Czechoslovaks thought that they could not use military means to try and wrest the town from Polish hands. Anyway, the dispute simmered on for 20 years. In international law, the town did belong to Teschen, but Teschen did actually belong to Czechoslovakia. It was effectively controlled by Poland. But anyway, it didn't actually come to war, which was a positive thing. The objective was to avoid war. So Poland was flexing her muscles, throwing her weight around, some would say. In 1919, the League of Nations had not been able to prevent an Italian from seizing Fiume, a town on the coast of Yugoslavia. This was Gabriele D'Annunzio. It wasn't the Italian government doing this, mind. It was a private individual who had quite a few followers. He was a proto-fascist. He was a man of hyper-nationalistic views. He said, "I glory in the fact that I am a Latin, and I recognize a barbarian in all those of non-Latin blood." One of his other poems said, "Do you want to see blood? Great heaps of gold? Slaves?" Well, he certainly did. He was the one who advocated for smash and grab imperialism. So D'Annunzio's action in Fiume was to the acute embarrassment of Rome. But only about half the people in Fiume were ethnically Italian, and they didn't all necessarily want to join Italy. There's no question that Fiume was legally Yugoslavia's. Anyway, the League of Nations was unable to uphold international law, and Italy, being at the Council of the League of Nations, was was able to do something to stop it. The Italian government was palsied, but finally in 1920 they arrested D'Annunzio, but they were denounced as traitors by some of their own people, saying, "Oh no, we should back him to the hilt." And some people favoured ram raid approach to international affairs. Mussolini became Prime Minister of Italy in 1922, and in 1924 he seized Fiume again. Well, on to another setback for the League of Nations. In 1920, Poland seized Vilnius, sometimes called Vilna or Vilno, from Lithuania. Vilnius was the largest city in Lithuania, close to the Polish frontier. However, a high majority of the people of that city were ethnically Polish. Although many people had a foot in both camps, Poland and Lithuania had been united for a time, and a lot of people in that region were ethnically ambiguous. The League of Nations was unable to induce the Poles to hand Vilnius back to Lithuania. So that was a failure for them. And of course, Poland had a very cordial relationship with France, which ensured that the League of Nations would not take firm action against the Poles. Another failure for them, the League of Nations had not prevented the Russo-Polish War of 1920-21. Indeed, France had been actively supporting and encouraging Poland, who was a sidekick. The French wanted to see the Bolsheviks in Russia thrashed and would like to see a mighty Poland. Therefore, Poland would be a potent ally of France in Eastern Europe. The Bolshevik Russian government was not a member of the League of Nations and therefore could scarcely appeal to the League of Nations and benefit from the League of Nations protection. Poland was trying to self-aggrandize, revive her large empire, such as existed in the 17th century when she was the mightiest state in Central and Eastern Europe. The Corfu incident I've mentioned earlier, where the League had no satisfactory response. Likewise, the Ruhr crisis of 1923. Coming on to other failures of the League of Nations. 1931 to 33, the League of Nations didn't take any serious action against the Japanese Empire. The Empire of Japan had attacked China and seized the northern province of Manchuria. The League of Nations impaneled the Litton Commission under a Britisher, Lord Litton. The Litton Commission arrived at the conclusion that Japan was very much in the wrong. The Chinese were righteous in this dispute. The Japanese took such umbrage at the very suggestion of impropriety that they walked out of the League of Nations. Thereafter that, there were only 4 permanent members of the League of Nations Council.